Hello future managers, welcome back to week 1, part 2. In our first video we talked about management levels and skills. In our second video we're going to talk about 2 different acronyms. The first is called POLK. When I think about a POLK, I want you to really remember that because that is a theme that is going to generate throughout our course. All management is kind of formed around the concept of POLK. And then last we're going to talk about SWOT, a second acronym, and you guys are actually going to have the opportunity to build your own personal SWOT this week. Okay, so what is a POLK? Well, POLK is actually the 4 main skills that bring together management, okay? So we're actually going to walk through this class focusing on POLK. So if you think about what a manager does, a manager wears a lot of hats, guys. A manager is in charge of all kinds of things. So yes, they're in charge of supporting and coaching and encouraging their team, but they're also in charge of planning. So put on that planning hat for a second, all right? They're setting the direction of the organization, and it could be the entire company as a whole. It could be a certain division of the organization. But basically, in the planning phase, we're setting out goals saying, hey, here are the things that I want us as an organization or us as a team to achieve every year, and then figure out how we're actually going to break it down into kind of micro bites and how we're going to meet that. So every year when I worked at GE, we would sit down in January and mark down all of our goals for the year. We'd put them all on a PowerPoint, and I should back up a little bit and say the company would share their big company goals, and I would have to figure out, hey, me as a team leader, what does that look like for me in my organization? So if the company's goals were to cut its costs by $100 million, well, I may not have $100 million to cut, but you know what? Maybe I can cut my operating budget by 10%. And so that would be one of my goals for the year. And I talk about maybe some of the ways, maybe through negotiation, I can cut my costs a little bit through there, and I'd have to go ahead and work through everything and try to figure out how can I kind of set my goals to help meet the company goals. But then beyond that, I have to think about goals for my team. I'm always going to be investing in them, always going to be continuing learning and growing. I want them to be satisfied in their careers. So I'm going to set goals that are going to help me meet my company objectives, and then also help my team to learn and grow as well, and kind of stretch them a little bit. All right? So that's all part of planning. A manager sits down every year and thinks about those kinds of things. Part of the planning phase is also trying to figure out, hey, what's going on around me? Do I know what my competitor at the company who has the exact same job as me is doing? You're going to analyze the current environment. And then you're going to figure out, how can I be better at my job? Or how can I be better than the other guy at my performance, etc. And that's actually an active planning thing. You always want to know what your competition is doing, what the market is doing, and then figure out, strategize how you're going to be better than the market. You're going to be better than your competitors. Okay, so that you're always setting yourself apart at a higher level. Okay, and then also, one of the big things managers does in planning, I told you managers wear a lot of hats. There are distractions running rampant. Like we used to say squirrel, because you can get distracted and lose time on things that don't really matter. So a manager's job is to figure out, hey, this is valuable, this is where we're going to spend our time on. We're not going to spin our wheels or waste the team's time on nothing, because that's how people get frustrated and dissatisfied with their job. All right, so you got to make sure that they're actually adding value, and people can see the value they're adding to the organization through their everyday work. All right, and when you do that, I'm going to keep in mind planning is not a manager's job. A manager is not a silo, okay? You should always be looking for input of everyone around you at all different levels, people that are above you, people that are below you, same level as you, all to help come together to do the planning. Okay, so that is the P in POLK, planning. Okay, next step we're going to look at is the O, organizing. Organizing is a lot, and when I think about organizing, I think about human resources. Some of you may be interested in a career in human resources, and I'll tell you what, those human resources managers do a fantastic job in the organizing part of that as well. But it's making sure that you have the right people, you're attracting the right people to your organization, and you have the tools in place to retain those people, to keep them with you, and that you also are going to be in the right places at the right times and doing the right things as well. And it's all of that coordinating to make everything come together to help you and your team be successful. And then you also, under organizing, you take a look at all the different resources that you could have in an organization. Now, what are the resources you have in an organization? Resources you may have in an organization. People, People are a resource. I'll write that on the board. What's the second one? Money, finances. That's a good one as well. The third one might be IP, intellectual property. What do we know? Okay, do we have some sort of information that makes us valuable? And then it can also be, I'm going to say land. Real estate, building, machinery, all of those things can all be considered resources. And every organization, believe it or not, has finite resources. Even the biggest of businesses, even the Googles out there that seem to have endless money, they all still have finite resources. And so we may have to say, hey, listen, how do we take the resources that we have that are limited and finite and maximize them? That requires fantastic organization, and that's one of the skills that a manager uses. Okay, the third one we're going to look at is leading. Leading and management go hand in hand. Let me tell you, you can lead and be a manager, but you can be a manager and not necessarily be a leader. I've had some of those. I'm looking forward to telling you those stories this semester, okay? But leading is basically saying, how can we motivate people? And by people, I mean it could be our employees underneath of me, it could be our customers, it could be our suppliers. How are we going to keep them excited and interested in what's going on in the business? So for myself, I work in the supply chain, and I worked in the supply chain in a down market. By that, I mean that customers weren't buying our products. So we were putting in steam turbines that go in around the world, and what we were recognizing is that we're putting in power plants, but there's a lot of renewable energy popping up. And in the next 10 or 15 years, it might be cheaper for them to put solar on the roofs of all their houses, in the Middle East, than it is for them to put in a big on-the-grid power plant. And so a lot of them are kind of sitting back. That could be a little bit scary for us in the business world, right? So we had to figure out, how do we keep our customers coming in? But then to do that, we had to lower our prices to make it more attractive to our customers. So if we had to lower our prices, guess who has to pass that on? Our suppliers. Our suppliers need to give us lower prices as well. So my job was to go out and negotiate with those, and also keep it exciting. Like, hey, we're going to keep business coming in, guys, despite the market being down. And so you have to continue. How do you keep people motivated even when the market is down? And you know what? The good thing about power generation, the business I worked in, is it's cyclical. It goes kind of like this. So when we're down, guess what? It'll come back up again. That's exactly how it does. And so when you're leading, you're basically saying, hey, listen, I'm going to go out and do this. Come join me. You're going to inspire people, not by your words, but by your actions. You're going to get people motivated to really perform above and beyond their abilities. And we'll talk a little bit more about what leadership looks like, how to make sure that you have the right people in your organization, so that you can actually get to those higher levels of performance. So we're going to talk about that. And then last is controlling. Okay, controlling is going to help you understand if you're on track. So I want you to keep in mind that, I'm going to erase this, and I'm going to write Polk on the board. P-O-L-C. We're all ready. Can you guys see that? Man, guys, I wish I had I need like a big fat marker. Okay. That help a little bit? Okay. Here's Polk. Okay. So we're going to do a quick review quiz. Okay. What does the P stand for? Planning. Okay? Planning. O, organizing. L is leading. And here we are at C, controlling. Now, planning and controlling had a really big tie. Okay? So go ahead and put a big swipe in this in your notes. Planning and controlling have a tie together. Why is that? Because planning says, hey, here's what we're setting out to do in January. Here's what are my goals for the semester. Controlling comes back around and says, did we accomplish what we set out to do? Yes or no? So you're monitoring your performance, and by usually when you try to plan, you want to set up some sort of a quantitative measure to be like, hey, I want to decrease my costs by 10%, right? We just talked about that. So what happens at the end of the year comes, and I've only decreased my cost by 8%? Was my adjustment too high, too low? What do I need to do? Because I fell short. What if I came to the end of the year and I cut my costs by 20%? Ooh, That sounds really nice. I might be a superstar. But what I would question is, was my planning accurate to begin with if my control was that far off? So you need to think about, what do I need to do to adjust my planning for the next year to make sure that I'm able to achieve what I set out to do? So maybe that 20% was a fluke. Maybe it's something that I can do year over year. I don't necessarily know. And I'm going to say in most businesses probably you'll be lucky to do 2 to 3% cost out in a year. But what I'm trying to share with you is your planning and control should be aligned. You should set goals that are realistic and achievable so that at the end of the year you can come back and say, yep, I accomplished that. I made all my team put our goals and objectives up on a PowerPoint slide on their office like I told you, and I set them up and we met bi-weekly to make sure at the end of the year everything was met. That's what a good manager does, guys. You think about Polk and you want to make sure that you're setting your team up to be successful. Okay, I'm going to keep rocking and rolling through this, guys, but that is Polk in a nutshell. We're going to move now to talking about SWOT. S-W-O-T. So SWOT is a 4-blocker, okay, and it has 4 main aspects, all right? SWOT stands for strengths, and that's going to be your upper left-hand side, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Okay. Businesses and managers use the SWOT analysis as a tool to figure out where they're at and how they're doing. All right, you guys are going to look at it this week from a personal perspective, and we'll talk about more about that in a second, but let's go over what a SWOT looks like. And then I'll show you guys how a business can necessarily use this as a tool to help them be strategic, help them gain more business, etc. So here's a SWOT. All right, for the strength side of the house, you're going to look at what are all the things that I'm good at. These are things that are internal to you, internal to a business, okay? Abilities and skills, experience, knowledge, resources. What are all the things that I have around me that are going to make me the best at what I am? So if I was looking at it personally, I might say, I have 15 years of business experience. That's obviously, I think, a strength over somebody that maybe has 2. That would be a strength that I would say that I have. But on the flip side, if I was a business, I might say a strength might be that I have subject matter expertise of an experienced workforce. Does that make sense a little bit? So you can kind of adjust this about a lot of different things. So that's an example of a strength. Next, let's move over to a weakness, okay? A weakness, and I apologize, let me bring this down a little bit so it's not cutting off the edge for you guys. I don't like that. Maybe we'll just do this. Is that a little better? Okay, so for a weakness, all right, that's going to say, hey, what's a resource that can be needed? Every organization has finite resources we talked about, so every organization always wishes they had more resources. Theoretically, more resources, more people, more money, more office space, more manufacturing space, more raw material. All of those things are things that we could put in our wish list, right? We all wish we had more resources, all right? But is it something that's holding the business back or something that's holding you back, okay? So from a weakness perspective, you might look at who your contacts are needed or your limitations. So I'll be honest with you guys. If you guys watched my my profile, you guys know that I am not a native San Diegan. I'm a New Yorker. Okay, so as a New Yorker, my San Diego contacts, I've been here since 2018, are still a little limited. I'm working hard to grow my network and grow my local contacts in the area. So that's one way that I personally have a weakness. And so if I was a business, I could talk about, one of the weaknesses is, no time spent in, if I'm introducing like my business to a new market, I may not have relevant market experience, something along those lines. I'm still getting to know the San Diego market. I'm still learning how to surf, guys, okay? But I'm still trying to figure out, that kind of a thing. So that's a personal weakness. All right, so keep in mind, guys, strengths and weaknesses are internal, okay? Strength, weakness, internal to the organization. Now, let's move up here to the lower left is opportunities. Now, when you're thinking about opportunities and in a moment threats, if strengths and weaknesses are internal, Opportunities and threats are external. Those are things that are external to you. Okay, so look outside of the marketplace and say, what are some opportunities that are out there? Man, you know what? I just told you guys, I don't have a ton of local contacts. I've only been in San Diego 2 years. What's the opportunity I have? Networking. Oh, and so you know what I did just this summer, guys? I joined a supply chain network, and I've been networking with supply chain managers all over the San Diego area. It's been awesome, let me just tell you. And they offer training as well, so I'm getting to know some of the businesses doing supply chain in San Diego and how that experience is different. That's a fantastic opportunity I have. It's external to myself, okay? So that's really, really cool. So that's an external opportunity. And to finish this up, last would be a threat. That could be a risk, that could be a change in circumstances, that could be any obstacles that could be in your way. So what could be maybe a threat to a business that's new in San Diego? Let's say COVID hits. Okay, who would have put that COVID or a pandemic would be in any sort of organizational threats for 2020? But here we are, okay? That can be a huge change in circumstances for a business that's just launching in San Diego. I've been watching on the news, there'll be local restaurants that have launched, just in the spring, and they've already had to shut their doors because they didn't have the customer base in the area worked up yet to be able to sustain their takeout business, and they've had to give up their lease. It's just horrible, right? But those are definitely a pandemic is an external threat to your environment. Okay, so that's a SWOT analysis. Let me show you guys what it looks like in a business context. So here at Point Loma in our main campus, we have Sodexo who runs our cafeteria. And let me just tell you, we had Sodexo in the GE cafeteria. What we have here at Point Loma is killing it, man. I'll tell you what, when I worked at GE, I would maybe go to the cafeteria once a month. To our cafeteria, maybe. It was okay, but it wasn't going to win any awards. Here, man, our salad bar alone is good. But let's say how Sodexo is doing. So if I was a Point Loma Nazarene and I was considering bringing in Sodexo, you know what I would do? I would pull up their SWOT analysis. And so when I worked for General Electric, we did the exact same thing. We actually kept kind of a pulse on all of our suppliers, because if one of our suppliers had a weakness or a threat, we wanted to know about it before they went under, or before they weren't able to send us our orders when we needed it, right? So it's a really good idea to kind of keep a pulse on a business through this SWOT analysis. So if I was, in charge of Point Loma, if I was President Brower, this right here is actually a SWOT analysis, and I'll open it up for you guys, on Sodexo. Now, keep in mind, if we wanted to buy that, it's going to cost us $125. Sorry guys, I'm not going to buy it just for the sake of an example for this class, okay? But you guys can see here, this is published in February, and there's a lot of really good businesses that are out there doing this, guys. All right? But you can see these are all the things they look at in their SWOT. The business description, corporate strategy, their SWOT analysis, company history, major products and services, key competitors. So maybe you could say, hey, what are their competitors? Let's check out their SWOT compared to Sodexo's. Look at who their key employees are. Figure out who their operational heads are. That's like their CEOs, and important locations and subsidiaries. So if I say, hey, listen, all their stuff is on the East Coast, maybe I wouldn't want to choose them for a West Coast company, for example. But those are all the kind of scopes you're going to see in a big SWOT analysis. So you guys will see that completely walked through. And again, we're not going to purchase that, but it just gives you guys an example. The SWOT analyses are a business tool that are extremely valuable for trying to figure out if we want to give this company our business, if we want to keep their business. And then also, if an outside company does a SWOT analysis on you and they expose a weakness, the company can now say, oh gosh, maybe I didn't see that, let me go in and fix it. So that's definitely something to kind of keep an eye on. So, GE always had a SWOT analysis done on them every year, and we always would try to anticipate whatever it would be and then mitigate whatever would come out as well. All right, so let's go back to our slideshow here. All right, so you guys have talked about SWOT. Here's an example of a personal SWOT for you guys, and again, this is just an example I pulled from the interwebs. All right, this is a Darren Dent personal SWOT, and I want you guys to use this as an example. But I want you guys to start thinking about, if you're going to manage yourself before you manage other people, how would you create a SWOT for yourself now? But I want you guys to start thinking about not only where am I at now, but how am I preparing myself for my very first job? And let's put your first job in a little bit of context for a minute. Your first job, maybe you have student loans to pay off, so you really want that job and you need to figure out how you're going to be competitive over the 20 other people that are applying for it. Maybe you want to get your first apartment all on your own. Maybe you want to buy your very first car. Maybe you want a Tesla, I don't know. But the marketplace is increasingly saturated with qualified workers, and you need to think about how you're going to set yourself apart. And so my job is to think about how to prepare you for that, but then also your job is to manage yourself to move into filling that role. So you can use this Darren Dent personal SWOT as an example, but here's a quick template for you guys. Thinking about putting in context your future career, and say you're stepping into your very first job, what are you going to say are your strengths or your weaknesses? Because I'll tell you what, when I was a manager and I was interviewing perhaps a new intern, for example, you better bet that I'm asking them for their strengths and their weaknesses. And this template right here, guys, is strength, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. It's skewed a little different, but just get the 4 blocks in for me. You guys will be fine. But what are your strengths? I need to be able to tell those to somebody if they ask in an interview. What are your weaknesses? You need to be able to speak to those as well. If you're trying to move to Palm Beach, you might have that same networking issue that we talked about earlier, and then those opportunities and threats outside of you. So focusing on your future career, make a personal SWOT for yourself and be honest with yourself. And then think about weaknesses, threats. For example, if you guys are going in for your first job and it's a big job, you might be against people that have 5 years of career experience. That could be a threat to you and also a weakness. So you need to think about how are you going to try to mitigate that planning forward. Internships, summer jobs, maybe a certain certification or something. It's really up for you and your career path. But I want you guys to start thinking about it now, planning for it now. So go ahead, create your personal SWOT. Hold on to it because I want to give you guys the opportunity to share that with your teams. In a couple weeks, we're going to do team assignments. So go ahead and create your personal SWOT, and I will look forward to seeing you at our Zoom. Thank you guys so much for your attention. Have a great rest of the day.